Hello to all our Facebook followers and welcome to our PIA Live session on Facebook Live. We're here with our Vice President of Government Relations, John Gentile. John is going to give us an update on what's happening on Capitol Hill, and he will answer a few questions. All right, John, what's happening on the Hill?
Well, thank you, Sade, and thank you all for being here and taking time out of your busy day. There's a great deal happening in Washington, D.C. these days in the insurance realm, so it's a timely time to do this live video chat. So we would, from flood insurance reauthorization, National Flood Insurance Program, to healthcare, tax reform, and the federal regulatory arena, we're constantly busy advocating on behalf of PIA members. So I welcome your questions, and with that, I'll turn it over to Sade.
Okay, John. First question. What are some of the issues for agents in the reauthorization of flood insurance?
The National Flood Insurance Program expires on September 30th of this year, so we're getting pretty close to that expiration date. Currently, the House of Representatives' Financial Services Committee, which has jurisdiction over the National Flood Insurance Program, has released a summary of yet-to-be-released draft legislation. We expect the full draft legislation to be released any day now. However, we have seen the summary of it. There are some positive things in the summary and some things that give us pause. On the positive end, it is a long-term 5-year reauthorization of the program. It also would include a provision that would help entice the expansion of the private flood legislation market, which PIA strongly supports. Just back in April, PIA members were in town advocating on behalf of the Flood Insurance Market Parity and Modernization Act, and that is that private flood legislation that's included in this summary draft. However, we are concerned with a provision in the summary that would lower the 30.9% write your own insurance carrier reimbursement rate down to 25%. We are fearful that this would eventually lead to a cut in agent commissions to sell national flood insurance policies. So we are pushing back on that cut, and again, without the full details released in the legislative text, we're only looking at a summary that we're yet to see how that will shake out. But we do anticipate that being released any day now. We are engaging with our congressional allies to push back against any cut to the write your own reimbursement rate. And we expect once that draft is released, there will be time for stakeholders, including PIA, to weigh in. There will also be a congressional hearing, and then followed by a markup where it's considered before committee. So we're fully engaged in advocating for a long-term reauthorization that is pro-consumer and pro-independent insurance agent.
What is PIA doing in the healthcare debate?
So the healthcare debate is a broad and at times complicated one. The House of Representatives passed on a party line vote legislation to make changes to the Affordable Care Act, they've passed that out of the House, full House, and now that moves on to the Senate, where the Senate is not working off of that bill, but working on their own Senate version. PIA from the beginning, since the ACA was signed into law, has been advocating on behalf of independent insurance agents. So we drill down and focus solely on the issues that really impact independent agents. For instance, the agent compensation issue. The medical loss ratio, as it came out of the ACA and a rule issued by the Department of Health and Human Services after the ACA was signed into law, has negatively impacted agents throughout the country by cutting their commissions. The medical loss ratio included a formula component where insurers had to spend a certain portion on administrative costs, and unfortunately, a Department of Health and Human Services rule included agent compensation in that administrative component, leading to massive cuts in agent commissions. We've been pushing back against that since the ACA was signed into law, since that rule came out. We have introduced legislation in the past. We are currently holding off with our allies on having that legislation reintroduced in this new 115th Congress, because we're hopeful that a regulatory package being put together by the new Secretary of Health and Human Services, former Congressman Tom Price, will include exempting agent commissions in the medical loss ratio formula. We expect that regulatory package to come out, if not in the summer, then perhaps in the fall, as they're working on it right now. Another area in healthcare that we're working on is defending the employer-sponsored market. Unfortunately, that has come under attack with a provision from the ACA called the Cadillac tax, which is a 40% excise tax on certain health plans. We've worked with members of Congress to introduce legislation to push back on that. The implementation of that tax was supposed to be in 2018. PIA, along with our allies, pushed back and had it delayed in 2 years until 2020. In the House passed health care bill, it delays it until 2025. So we are pleased by that, but we are pushing for its full repeal. So those are just some of the issues that we're working on, and as you can tell, they're ones that specifically impact independent insurance agents and consumers.
We have a really good one here. Will FIO be repealed this year?
The Federal Insurance Office was created in the Dodd-Frank reform bill, which is currently seeing reform action on it in the House of Representatives, as part of something called the Financial Choice Act, or H.R. 10 is the bill number. So much of Dodd-Frank is being rolled back in that effort. We are focusing on, PIA was the first national association to call for the full repeal of the Federal Insurance Office. We have been joined by the Insurance Commissioner Association as well as the Mutual Insurance Company Association in publicly calling for the full repeal of the FIO. The political dynamic right now is such that perhaps a full repeal may not be on the table, but we are dedicated to, at minimum, receiving a curtailing of the Federal Insurance Office in anything that moves past Congress this year or next year. So the House is considering the Financial Choice Act. It actually goes the other way in this debate. It includes it merges the Federal Insurance Office with another component from the Dodd-Frank and proposes to create a very large insurance office, which PIA and others have come out in opposition to. So we are working with our allies in Congress and industry stakeholders to see if we can't come to some sort of agreement that if it doesn't repeal FIO, it certainly doesn't go the other direction and create a large federal insurance entity so that we can get it so that state insurance commissioners, insurance remains in that realm and back up with the states where it belongs and not in Washington, D.C.
John, I think we have time for one more question. What is PIA advocating for in tax reform?
That's a very timely question. The House Ways and Means Committee held a hearing today on tax reform proposals. The big players in the Trump administration met yesterday to find a way to move forward in the tax reform debate. PIA, as we have done in the past and will continue to do, is trying to ensure that small business owners are included in any tax reform package, and it's not just the large corporations. We want to ensure that if you're a small business owner and you file as a pass-through entity, an S corporation, that you get tax relief even though you don't file corporately, you file with your individual tax return. The good news is that Congress has heard our call for this. In the House GOP budget plan that came out in the spring of 2016, they proposed to lower the rate for S corporations to 25%. President Trump's plan would go further. It would go to 15%. Now, as with anything, the devil's in the details. And so as we await for the tax legislation to be drafted and a discussion draft released, we really can't say exactly where they are, but it's a positive thing that at the beginning stages of this, they started this process by including small business owners in tax relief.
Thanks, John. Unfortunately, we're out of time. And thank you all for joining us today. And we hope that you will join us again for our next Facebook Live session. Thank you for watching and have a great day.
Thank you.